Published 0409s, the 21st of December 2017. Updated 0616s, the 21st of December 2017. After 4 years of high-octane action involving sex, drugs and bloody brutality, Peaky Blinders ended with its most shocking scene yet. The gang's ruthless, tormented leader Tommy Shelby seen to have joined the Labour Party. The closing moments showed the series' hero villain walking down the steps of the town hall accompanied by his wife and family, the very picture of respectability, having been elected as an MP. Scroll down for video. Tommy Shelby is the 1920s Jeremy Corbyn. The Brummy gangster saw off the mafia, then became the Labour Party's latest star in the season finale of Peaky Blinders, and people say Jeremy Corbyn had some dubious criminal connections. Presumably, after a career as Small Heath's hardest bookie, protection racketeer and IRA arms dealer etc., he figured his reputation couldn't get any worse. Tommy, that is, not Jeremy. On the plus side, at least the ruthless feuds, devious plotting, unexpected alliances and betrayals Shelby had been through during the last 6 weeks meant he would be well prepared for life in politics. Season 4 was Peaky Blinders' best yet, mostly because it was their worst. The best yet. Season 4 was Peaky Blinders' best yet, mostly because it was their worst. Creator-writer Stephen Knight had sensibly cleverly shaken up the show's slightly stale formula, making the Peaky Blinders the hunted rather than the hunters, sending them sliding from their position of power just when they had got to the top, like a game of gangland snakes ladders. When the mafia turned up in Birmingham from New York intent on resolving their vendetta, the Peaky Blinders discovered they were not as tough as they thought they were. With their fedoras and double-breasted Italian suits, the arrival of Luca Changretta, Adrian Brody, and his hoodlums also meant the Peaky Blinders weren't even the best-dressed gang in their own series. Pretty humiliating. Angry Tom Hardy and Adrian Brody gave an acting masterclass and lesson in star quality compared to the mafiosos' machine guns. The Brummies' trademark razorblade caps suddenly just looked quaint. The bigger the show's reputation has become, particularly in the States, has also given it more depth, particularly with its guest stars, along with the hypnotic Cillian Murphy as Tommy. Tom Hardy and Adrian Brody gave an acting masterclass and lesson in star quality. Their sparring turned Season 4 into a brilliant whispering competition. Brody brazenly reprised Marlon Brando's famous mumbling from The Godfather, while Hardy produced a wacky wacko character Alfie Solomons that made his eccentricities into look restrained. Last week Solomons had started his big meeting with Brody's mafiosa stood with his eyes shut, to better understand the darkness. Final fight. The boxing match between Solomons' aptly named protege, Giant Goliath, and Shelby's gypsy prizefighter Bonnie Gold. Eventually he'd done a deal, selling out Tommy, enabling Changretta's men to try and take out the Shelbys at the first of the finale's 3 showpiece scenes. The boxing match between Solomons' aptly named protege, Giant Goliath, and Shelby's gypsy prizefighter Bonnie Gold. Big versus small. Big will FK small. Alfie told Tommy his prediction of the result of both the bout and the Shelbys' vendetta with Changretta. The setup seemed to have been foiled though when Arthur Shelby began to suspect the assassins that Solomons had smuggled in, posing as Goliath's cornermen. They don't know fighters. They don't stand right. They don't move right, Arthur deduced, even though he spent the night and most of the series hoovering cocaine. The action cut between the brutality of the boxing ring and the even bloodier fights unfolding behind the scenes. These resulted in Arthur being garroted, Tommy shooting the hitman responsible dead, and then spurring on young Finn Shelby to exact revenge against the accomplice, urging, "Take his eyes. Do it for Arthur." Brutal. The action cut between the brutality of the boxing ring and the even bloodier fights unfolding behind the scenes. No, everything was as it seemed though, as we discovered at the second showdown between Brody and Murphy. It appeared Tommy had conceded defeat and Luca come to claim the spoils of his victory, forcing the Peaky Blinders boss to sign everything over to the Changrettas. "I was gonna bury you all," Brody whispered to Murphy in his best Brando mumble. "But my mother said it will be worse for you if I let you live and take away everything that you have. You can sign the papers on your knees." Of course Knight wasn't going to let the show's heroes slide back to nothing. Foul play. The setup seemed to have been foiled though when Arthur Shelby began to suspect the assassins that Solomons had smuggled in, posing as Goliath's cornermen. Tommy had done a deal with 2 rival gangs in New York eager to move in on Changretta's liquor empire, plus a third American ally. CTHE setup seemed to have been foiled though when Arthur Shelby began to suspect the assassins that Solomons had smuggled in, posing as Goliath's cornerman, Chicago's Al Capone. The ensuing fight saw Tommy give Luca a good old-fashioned headbutt before Arthur walked in back from the grave and shot the mafia gangster in the head. Tommy Shelby had tricked everyone as much as Knight had fooled the viewers. After this, Tommy moved quickly onto Margate of all places, to make Solomons pay for his betrayal. "You going to look after this dog then?" Alfie greeted him on the beach, knowing what was coming. A smart addition with their fedoras and double-breasted Italian suits. The arrival of Luca Changretta, Adrian Brody and his hoodlums also meant the Peaky Blinders weren't even the best-dressed gang in their own series. Pretty humiliating, no? Well, his name is Cyril and he will be very upset and distressed, so you'll need to find him someone. He rambled on with typical Hardy eccentricity while Tommy shouted for him, "Stop talking and look at me," before eventually shooting each other at the same time. A classic resolution from gangster films down the ages. While Tommy was naturally only wounded, the implication was that his ex-friend was dead, although Shelby noticeably didn't check. If Tom Hardy isn't returning, Stephen Knight writing, Alfie Solomons, the early years for him would be even better. Taking a shot. There was plenty of violence in the season finale with no one trying to kill you, as Arthur Shelby put it. Tommy was sent on holiday, theoretically to play golf and go fishing. Instead he had a breakdown, plagued by flashbacks of the war and drinking himself senseless. This was presumably Knight's form of mitigation, persuading us Tommy wasn't really a bad man, or if he was, it wasn't his fault. Like a lot of writers who've created violent gangsters, he wants his cake and eat it, and never ultimately nails his colors to the mast, either condoning or condemning them. Maybe it's in us 'cause we're Shelbys, Aunt Polly suggested. It's our gypsy blood. We live somewhere between life and death, waiting to move on. In the end we accept it. We shake hands with devils and we walk past them. Eventually this is what Tommy did. Not so bad. Tommy wasn't really a bad man, or if he was, it wasn't his fault. He walked past the devil. I've learned something. There's no rest for me in this world. He returned to work, to being the head of the Peaky Blinders, and ruthlessly pursuing whatever was in his fair interests. Much like the first series, this involved playing off a politically motivated movement against the government monarchy they were rebelling against. He seduced the young trade union leader Jessie Eden, who had brought the Shelby's factories to a halt, and persuaded her he wanted to support the fight for workers' rights enough to introduce him to the secret subversive figures organizing the 1926 general strike. It must have been his blue eyes and beguiling whisper, either that or the gin. Down at it. Must have been his blue eyes and beguiling whisper, either that or the gin. From there Tommy went straight to the King's personal secretary, Arthur Bigg. A real historical figure had already arranged for him to receive an OBE in exchange for the return of some damaging stolen letters written by George V. Now Tommy offered to provide him and Winston Churchill, who holds me in very high regard, the names of every Communist Party member in Britain, all with the identity of the agent the Soviets had planted high up in the Birmingham branch. In fact, Tommy would now do the same thing, rise through the ranks of the wider socialist movement, as he put it, effectively as a government spy. Undercover. In fact, Tommy would now do the same thing, rise through the ranks of the wider socialist movement, as he put it, effectively as a government spy. Well, that's what he told them anyway. Bigg obviously believed him. He was as smitten as poor Jessie. "You are quite a creature, Mr. Shelby," he told him. Appropriately, of course. The last of the many songs in Season 4 was a version of A Hard Rain's Egg Gonna Fall, which it undoubtedly will in the next series. This was playing as we discovered what Tommy had wanted in return, ironically, from both Arthur Bigg and Jessie Eden, help becoming a Labour MP. If Tommy's selling gin to Al Capone and dazzling Parliament as small hits version of Jeremy Corbyn, the next series won't be dull.